And please welcome President of Michigan Forward, Brandon Jessup.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I see we have the phone still sitting here, so I know how much time I'm taking. And Donnell is always modest when he talks about my relationship with the NAACP. I mean, come on, I grew up with y'all pretty much. So let's just say it like that, y'all family. But last Tuesday was one of those big, huge days in Detroit history. As we all know, Judge Rhodes decided to declare that the city of Detroit was eligible for Chapter 9 municipal bankruptcy. For many of us, we took that as a political blow, maybe like the coup de grace for emergency management for Kevin Orr. But one thing I want to make sure that we understand here today is that that's actually not the case. That was phase one in a two-part process for the city of Detroit. Post last Tuesday, or pretty much a week ago, now the city is on the clock to present their plan of adjustment, okay? The problem for us is that the people who should be writing that plan of adjustment should be the newly elected officials and the current mayoral administration that's in office. Unfortunately, I don't know how folks in this room voted. I know how I voted. We got a new mayor and a new city council in place. And they got plans, they got ideas, but as we know right now, Public Act 436, 2012, the emergency management law does not allow those folks to have a voice in this process. So two things should come from the bankruptcy piece. One is reorganization of the city. I'm tired of calling 14 different departments to get a house torn down, just like the rest of you guys. But the other part that comes from this bankruptcy piece is the reduction of debt. And if any one of you have already been through a personal bankruptcy to some degree, that's pretty much why you go through this, okay? It's to reduce your debt. Well, about 6 months ago, there was a few folks who were running for mayor. One was Tom Barrow, another was Lisa House. They both challenged the notion of what bankruptcy really meant for the city of Detroit and what the real problem was. It was not long-term debt. Long-term debt, if everyone filed bankruptcy for long-term debt, our financial system would crash. Matter of fact, our system is based off of long-term debt. You can't have debt if you don't have credit, okay? So what we're dealing with in the city of Detroit and why Kevin Orr was brought here in the first place, as you may remember in March, there's a conversation about Detroit doing what? Having payless paydays again. Payless paydays, payless paydays. And whenever you got in a conversation around emergency management, what was the safeguard to not have an emergency manager? Well, to pay your paychecks, right? Meet your monthly obligations. Well, the city, since emergency management, still has not done that, okay? Right now, the city is facing a $200 million debt, short-term deficit right now. So at the end of this year, the city of Detroit still may not be able to pay its bills. But yet, as you all know, Kevin Orr has given almost $100 million in contracts out over the last 6 months, okay? And that's just a soft estimate. We don't know how much money really has been transferred through the emergency manager's office and whomever else. Now, also with that, we talk about debt. And people say, well, the pension's out of control. Under no circumstance will all 20,000 pensioners in the city of Detroit demand all their money back at the same time. All of it. It would never happen, okay? If they did, they'll have a different payout system, and guess what? The pension would have been broken a long time ago, but you'll have no debt because you'd be obligated to make sure that the money would be in the bank whenever, at any time, everyone asks for that money, correct? So, we got 20,000 folks living off a pretty healthy pension fund system in the city of Detroit. What has happened, and Unite here would tell us just the same, just as well as ASME, Metro AFL, whomever, who not. The layoffs that the city has had over the last 5 years is a deliberate impact on the city's pension system, period. When you lay off city workers, you don't have people to pay into the system to actually meet the contractual obligations that the city has set forth. So the austerity measures brought forth from this current administration, also added with a cut in state revenue sharing, okay, also added with the fact that we don't collect our tax revenues, okay, is the reason why we've laid off over 3,000 people in the last 4 years. 3,000. Okay, now we could talk about furlough days, but that's a whole other conversation right now. I want us to stay focused on the fact that we are purposely destroying our public pension system. Now, what use is it to give someone a $24,000 defined contribution plan to get a Wall Street so they can play with your little money off in Wall Street? And when it's gone in another great recession, they tell you, oops, I'm sorry, I don't know what happened. What good is it? What good is it? What good is it to you when you've worked 10, 20, 30 years and it's just to find out that some young punk in Wall Street just blew all your money? Okay, or some old punk in Wall Street blew all your money, whichever one you want to choose. Okay, but that's what's happened a few years ago. I want to talk a little bit about municipal finance now, okay, because that's directly tied with this pension situation. In 2005, the city of Detroit took a loan out for $1.44 billion. Okay, that was to do what? Once again, balance pension obligations. Now, big Wall Street banks came in and they stormed our elected officials, city council and mayor, and said, if you don't do this right now, if you don't take out this loan right now, you're going to go broke in 5 years. And we went broke all right. They gave us a variable interest rate of almost 8%. On $1.4 billion. Let's just go over the interest on that. Over the last 5 years, the city of Detroit has paid $800 million in debt service payments. $800 million. Okay? Just last year, $550 million was paid by the Detroit Water and Sewage Department just to shore up some of that long-term debt. Okay? This is what Michigan Forward calls predatory lending, and we identified very clearly in this flyer here that says at the top, keep $350 million in the city of Detroit. Why? Because these same banks are coming back and saying, well, you know what? I know we had a really good deal in 2005 that paid us off pretty well. And in order for you to stop paying us, we're going to charge you $350 million in termination fees just to terminate this contract. Now that's loan sharking, from what I know. Big time loan sharking. Now, you say, well, just take the money and go get it and run. But guess what? We're already broke, right? So why would a bank bend over backwards to loan to people who they know cannot pay the debt? Ask yourself that question. If you know your brother does not make enough money to pay you back the $20 that they asked from you today, would you give him $20 tomorrow? No, because now you're $40 short. So guess what? What they've done is first they went to the bankruptcy court and they said, Judge Rhodes, can you give us clearance to step around this bankruptcy process to collect our debt early? Because we know the longer we wait in this bankruptcy process, this long-term debt now gets thrown into the pot when everyone else is dead. And they know that the contract that they signed in 2005 should be worth zero today. The federal government has paid them back twice for bad loans. The city of Detroit has already given $800 million for these same loans. I think we've met our obligation already. Now, I want to be very, very clear about this. This bankruptcy process is not over. The big banks now are weighing in on the emergency manager to make sure they get their cuts first. Now, you've heard that there are 4 options for seniors and retirees right now. To be quite honest, it's only one option as far as these banks are concerned. It's to pay and to pay dearly. Okay? Now, they say some folks say if you're over 60 or plus, your pension may not be hurt. Well, guess what? I want to see it on paper first. And I'll also tell you that Kevin Orr probably won't put that plan on paper at all. So as we move forward and hearing what had happened last Tuesday, Michigan Forward as well as Detroiters Resisting Emergency Management has put forth 2 pledges. Michigan Forward has a Michigan Reinvestment and Recovery pledge that you will also find there. This pledge states very clearly the situation in the city of Detroit, but not only the city of Detroit, but any other community facing financial distress. Okay? We tie the 13 municipalities right now facing emergency management and the multiple school districts that are not under emergency management or going into emergency management. We tie their financial problems to everything Governor Snyder has done since January 1st, 2011. His cuts in revenue sharing has cost the city of Detroit last year by itself $67 million. Remember that number I gave you earlier, $200 million in short-term cash flow debt? Let's take 67 away from that, okay? Now we're at $133 million that we're short. Last year alone, if the Michigan legislature would have acted and passed legislation that would make make the automatic withholding of local income taxes a state law, that would have given Detroit another $100 million. Now I've cut our debt once again by $100 million. It means that the city of Detroit will be short only $33 million this year. Okay? Okay. The third option that we want to talk about is the termination of these interest rate swaps. Okay? Like we talk about the bad deal with Barclays, guess what? That would have saved us $50 million last year. So now we're in the black, $17 million in 2013. If we make these changes today. Okay? Fourthly, we talk about a 10-year moratorium on what? Tax abatement programs. We want to actually take the time to see what is the value of a tax abatement program. My dad lost his job at Chrysler for a few years on strike, fighting the fact that Chrysler wanted to build a new Jefferson North plant downtown. Okay? He said that if you give these guys these tax breaks, yeah, I have a job for a little bit, but sooner or later somebody got to pay something. It can't just be all on me paying my property taxes. Well, guess what? He got his job back, the plant's still there, and they just started paying taxes, I think, 2-3 years ago on that land. That plant's been down there longer than I've been alive. Okay? So we talk about folks like Dan Gilbert and all these big companies that come into Detroit and they import jobs from other areas. Okay, they don't create a job anywhere. They move jobs from one location to another. Ask Livonia. Okay. And then we give them big tax breaks. And our question is, well, what's the value of that tax break outside of subsidizing your moving cost? And how can we make sure that these same abatements work for small businesses across the city of Detroit? So don't just give me the storefront for $1. Make sure that my taxes are affordable. Then I can stay here longer than just a year that you give me $1 rent. And then fourthly, we go very radical. I know for some people in here, they're going to ask you, well, what the hell are you thinking, Brandon? But we go and we say, guess what, state of Michigan? Since 2007, you've gotten $85 per person in this state as credit to your private activity bond activity. Okay? To date, well, last year, at December 31st, 2012, the state of Michigan received $101 per every resident in this great state of ours. So our private bond right now is worth over $850 million. That private activity right now is funding only one operation, and that's Pure Michigan. So when you get ready to go and you go out of town, you see that Pure Michigan ad, and Washington, as I've seen them too at the hotel, like, what the heck? You talking about skiing in March? That's Pure Michigan. But they've only allocated $100 million of that money. So we're asking very succinctly for $350 million of private activity bonds to help us reinvest and build a new infrastructure, okay, across not just the city of Detroit, but in every urban area across this state. What we found is that the top 7 counties attribute to over 65% of that private activity market. Okay, all the major communities right now that are faced with emergency management as a political tool to get them to bow down. Okay, so we know right now with this legislature we have a fight on our hands. We understand that totally. But the purpose of this pledge is to get our elected officials today and our potential elected officials next year to sign to an urban agenda. An urban agenda. And if we set these things right here first as revenue first, I think you understand what I'm talking about. Is how do we really gain reparations for a community that has gotten nothing for over 40 years?